Ahsoka Part 6 started with a very clever interaction between Ahsoka and Huyang as they make their way to Peridea. It's one which is multifaceted and has several layers of interpretation. Huyang offers to tell Ahsoka a story from his extensive knowledge of the history of the galaxy, which we find out as a 3-volume series that he's got stored in his memory archive. Ahsoka says she remembers it from the days of the Jedi Temple of old, and notes that Part 1 was of course the best. This was a meta moment that gave a small nod to the audience while also advancing something very interesting in-universe as well. Let's start with the latter. In-universe, Part 1 is the dawn of the Jedi, a time period James Mangold is going to explore in his upcoming Star Wars movie. And keep in mind Huyang was around back then. He's been around for 25,000 years. So of course he remembers the first Force users who used the term Jedi to identify themselves. Out of universe though, as fans, we tend to categorize the Skywalker saga into 3 parts: the prequels, the original trilogy, and the sequel trilogy. If we are to interpret what Ahsoka said in real-world terms, she acknowledged that Part 1 is the best. So is Dave Filoni saying here that the prequels are the best in his estimation? And since he's been responsible for expanding so much Clone Wars lore over the years, and these are precious to George Lucas too, it should come as no surprise he would think this. Unless, and I've seen a few suggest this, you want to think of Part 1 as the original trilogy because it came out first. But remember, Ahsoka herself does not mean this in the context of the show, because the sequel trilogy hasn't happened yet, so it wouldn't make sense to have the 3 parts signify these time periods, one which hasn't even taken place. But as I say, it was a moment that gave the audience a light-hearted reference to smile about. As aforementioned, Part 1 is a very intriguing period of time. The first Force users who are aware of the Force energy of Ashla, drawn to the light. I think this was Dave Filoni giving James Mangold a little bit of a shout out. I know no production has taken place just yet on any of these upcoming films, but Huyang could very well appear in all of them. He goes on to begin telling Ahsoka the tale, but begins it with a classic line before the scroll of every Star Wars movie of the 9 trilogy films: "A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away." While we were all doing the Leonardo DiCaprio meme where he's pointing at the TV screen, when you really think about what Huyang is saying, he's implying the first Force users were not in the known Star Wars galaxy, but in a different one far, far away. Unless this is just bad writing and just member berries, but think about it. Huyang and Ahsoka exist in the Star Wars universe, which we call the galaxy far, far away. But if in the story they use the same line, they're talking about a different galaxy. This could suggest that the Jedi and maybe the Sith originate in the galaxy that Peridea is in, and not the known galaxy. Given ties to the Nightsisters, possible Force deities, and even the Zeffo, because some fans discovered text on Peridea which does allude to one of their deities. It says, "Praise Kujet, ruler of all, may his reign last." He was the dark side Zeffo whose tomb is explored in Jedi Fallen Order. It is very possible that Huyang's origins and the origins of the First Jedi have an overlap, and these origins do not lie on Arc 2 or Tython, but rather in Peridea. How this comes full circle, if it's going to, in either James Mangold's film or if Dave explores it in Ahsoka Season 2, in the last remaining episodes of this season, or in his movie, remains to be seen. Now we are basing a lot of this on the assumption that Huyang's stories are specifically about the Jedi. He says history of the galaxy. This is vague, but whatever the story he's about to tell Ahsoka, it does not originate in the galaxy they're in. He might be about to tell Ahsoka the same story that Baylan has been speaking about ever since Part 2, the pathway to Peridea. Very Jedi-centric, but I love this reference. Now while we're on the subject of the Force, everyone wants to know, what is Baylan truly seeking? There is something in the Force, and I've kind of teased this with the Zeffo connection, that I think both Baylan and Thrawn are aware of, something which Shin Hati doesn't know, and something which we the audience have yet to discover. Baylan believes in keeping his cards close to the chest for now, refusing to tell even his Dark Jedi apprentice more than he feels she needs to know at any one time. He does explain a little bit about his plans in episode 6, talking about a cycle of light and dark that has existed for millennia, and he wants to go back to the beginning. He wants to break the cycle of pain, the rise and fall of various institutions. There are lots of theories out there about Abeloth, but as with all projects, we as the fans will have to theorize, and there's nothing wrong with that, but usually the answer is something very different. If it is going to be something in universe, then I think the Zeffo are a very strong possibility. because the words were literally inscribed in Peridea in Part 6. That is not just fan speculation, that is literally in the episode. There are connections between the Nightsisters, Dathomir and the Zeffo as well, and on top of this they were very powerful. The 2 Jedi games were so popular that of course, Lucasfilm is going to capitalize on them as much as possible and bring certain aspects into live action. We saw this with Kenobi, and it appears as though they might be doing this again. And it's also worth considering that Ezra might be aware of this. It's entirely possible Baylan is not the only one sensing this call. So who was Kujet, this dark side Zephonian force? He was held up as one of the greatest Zephonian sages. He promised his followers and acolytes power and control like they've never known. Control of fate, life wind, and the force itself. His story connects to the Nightmothers. He established a palace on Dathomir centuries ago. During his life he ruled over Peridea, and since his death, it's believed his soul provides guidance to those who seek it. Is this what Baylan is searching for? Or is it something greater? In Chuck Wendig's Aftermath trilogy, which I've spoken quite a bit about on the channel, one of Palpatine's advisors noted that he too sensed something calling him through the Force. When the Emperor was alive, he believed it to be coming from the unknown regions, prompting his attempts to explore this vast tract of space. But it's very possible it came from somewhere far beyond, Peridea. If that's the case, and both entities are the same, we're dealing with a very dark presence. Aftermath also implies that this presence is very expansive and doesn't manifest in just one way. Here's what it says, here's the quote. The Emperor was convinced that something waited for him out there. Some origin of the Force, some dark presence formed of a malevolent substance. The Emperor called it a signal, conveniently one that only he could hear. Even his greatest enforcer, Vader, seemed oblivious to it. And Vader also claimed mastery over the Dark Force, did he not? Gallius Rax believed Palpatine had gone mad. And what's really interesting is that Palpatine did not want to explore Peridea. He didn't believe it was out there. Extragalactic communication seemed impossible. Outside the known galaxy is an unexplored infinity, one closed off by a labyrinth of solar storms, rogue magnetospheres, black holes, gravity wells, and things far stranger. Any who tried to conquer that maze did not survive. The ships were obliterated, or returned to the galaxy devoid of travelers. Communications from those explorers were incomprehensible, either shot through with such static as to make the content useless, or filled with enough inane babble to serve as a sign that the explorer had gone utterly mad out there in isolation. There are a couple of things to consider here. It's even possible that the entity Baylan senses has been manipulating other characters too. It could have been what was calling to Sabine back on Lothal. We thought it was Ezra reaching out in the Force, but what if it was really this entity, luring Sabine? Maybe Ahsoka felt the same call, and given her ties to the daughter, this entity could want her to arrive in Peridea for one reason or another. What do you guys think it is? In my full episode breakdown I talked about the Whills. Could it be them? Is it the Zeffo? Is it something more evil like Abeloth? Abeloth is the bringer of chaos, promising to help keep the balance between light and dark. She sought immortality, but she was corrupted along the way. Or is it something new entirely? If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. May the Force be with you, always.